How many ancient Greeks does it take to screw in a light bulb? All of them. Get it? Olive them? Nice. All right. One more. Why is Greek food so fatty? Because of all the grease. Oh, simple jokes are sometimes the best jokes. All right, sixth grade. This is the third time I have tried to make this video. I keep recording this video and something always goes wrong with it. So I just want to let you know I'm like really frustrated with making this video. The first time I made it, my sister interrupted me and like completely ruined it. And the second time, for some reason, the camera turned off like halfway through. So I'm thinking third time's the charm. All right, so I left off talking about slavery and the fact that it's so common. The philosopher Aristotle famously said that some people are naturally born to be slaves, and too bad for them. Right? That's basically what he said. So basically, slaves were seen as a natural part of human society in Greece. They did not think there was anything wrong with slavery at all, even though slaves were often very badly mistreated and they didn't have any rights. There's a very famous slave, however, named Aesop, or maybe it's Aesop. I forget how to pronounce it. Aesop is famous because even though he is a slave, he wrote something called Aesop's Fables, which is a collection of fables, which are short stories, usually featuring animals, that teach a moral lesson or some kind of useful life lesson. So some slaves were somewhat successful. Usually, the way you became a slave is you were captured in war. Oftentimes, however, slaves were people who were abandoned by their parents when they were small children or babies. Sadly, in ancient Greece, uh, they Greeks did not believe that mothers and fathers had a responsibility to care for all of their children. So if you had a child and that child was a baby, and you decided that you didn't want that child anymore, one thing you could do is you could bring that baby to a wealthy family and say, hey, if you take the baby, you can raise the baby as your personal slave. Right? And this is sadly very common in ancient Greece. Um, Another way people became slaves is they were foreigners or metics, and they were not able to make a living as merchants or artisans. Their business failed. Nobody wanted their work. And so to feed themselves, they had to sell themselves into slavery. So many slaves were treated very poorly. Not all of them were. Some slaves were treated very well, because if you're a baby and you're raised in the family, a wealthy family, alongside that family's other children, you might form friendships with those children, right? And the parents might see that friendship and might treat you well. So sometimes you were treated well or even free. All right, so the Greek family was really important in Greek society. There's a Greek philosopher named Xenophon who expressed a lot of the values that Greeks had about families. Um, but one thing that you need to know is that Xenophon also expressed gender roles within families. So he believed that men, and Greeks accepted this, they believed that men should work outside of the home, that women should work inside of the home as much as possible. So there's a strict division of labor between men and women. Also, children were considered extremely important, assuming they're children that the family actually wanted to raise. Right? So if you had a baby and you wanted to keep the baby and raise the baby as your child, then that was really important to your family. So before the age of 6, children were children. They played, they were raised by their mothers and their fathers. Remember, these are the children who were kept in the homes, not the children who were given away or sold into slavery. Once you turned 6, however, everything changed. Right? when you turned 6, boys and girls were separated. The boys were sent to school. The girls, sorry, stayed at home, just like a COVID-19 quarantine. You had to stay at home and basically just clean and cook and learn how to do chores and how to sew things. The boys, however, were sent to school, and they stayed in school until they were 18. If you're wealthy, you'd be sent to school with a slave. That slave's job was to make sure you paid attention at school, make sure you did your work, make sure you didn't misbehave. And if you did misbehave, that slave would smack you with a stick. Right? So if you weren't paying attention, you'd get whacked with a stick. And that's what the slave's job was. Now, unlike school today, you wouldn't actually go to a school building or to a classroom. Usually what you would do is you would go to the home of the teacher. And oftentimes there would just be one student in the class, you. So can you imagine if you had to come to my house, like have class in my beautiful garage here, right? Oh, wouldn't that be fun? You'd just be in here with me for like 8 hours, just you and your slave and me, and you would deal with my hilarious jokes all day. Right? Well, teachers, just like the slaves, got to smack the students with a stick if they misbehaved. Not only that, though, so you'd be sitting in this classroom with me, and I'd be holding a big stick, and if you got a question wrong, I would whack you on the head with the stick, and it would hurt, right? So the idea was, in order to avoid the pain, you would try very hard to get the question right. Right? Greeks believed that this was how education needed to work, right? So even though Greeks had very strict schools, Greece had the best education system out of any ancient civilization that we study by far. All right, we'll close with women. So in ancient Greece, before the city-states, women could have a lot of political power. Sometimes women could even rule as a queen. This is the story. This is present in Homer's Odyssey. So in the Odyssey, Penelope, who is the wife of King Odysseus, is queen Penelope, while Odysseus is away fighting the Trojan War and then sailing around the Mediterranean Sea for 10 years trying to get home. So Penelope represents sort of the ideal Greek woman. She stays in the home, she entertains guests, she sews clothing, she weaves tapestries, and most importantly, she remains loyal and faithful to her husband, refusing to marry anyone else, even though everyone thinks Odysseus is dead because he's been gone for 20 years. Right? She stays loyal. She doesn't even know if he's alive. Right? So that's basically what women were supposed to do. They were supposed to manage the household, just like Penelope, keep track of money, raise the children, manage the slaves if they owned any, prepare the food, make the clothing, the drapes, tapestries. Importantly, women did not have the ability to inherit property. Now, why does this matter? Well, this matters because if you can't inherit property, that means you are completely dependent on your husband for financial support, right? Now, if you're going to be completely dependent on your husband for financial support, that means you probably can't marry the person that you fall in love with. In fact, you're probably not likely to fall in love at all. So you would have to marry the person who would be most likely to financially support you. And in the case of ancient Greece, this means you would have to marry the person that your father chooses for you. So the ability to inherit property is really important. Right? When women in societies develop the legal right to inherit property, they're no longer financially attached to their future husbands, and that gives them more flexibility and freedom in choosing a husband for themselves. They don't have to rely on their father's choice for them. Importantly, most Greek women married between the ages of 14 and 18. So in ancient Greece, like most civilizations, they did not have the concept of being a teenager, right? Once you reached a certain stage in your biological development, ladies, you would be considered a woman. You're no longer a child, you're now a woman, so it's time to get married, right? And for most women, this was as young as the age of 14, and almost everyone would be married off by the age of 18. The men that these women married were usually 30, right? That is my age, right? And of course, that would be illegal in the United States today, as it should be. But remember, in ancient Greece, they didn't have a concept of being a teenager. It was you're either a child or you're a grown woman. And if you were 14, you were considered a grown woman. So if your father found a 30-year-old man that you had to marry, didn't matter if he was gross and ugly, and you had to marry him because that's who your dad picked. All right. I bet you're glad you didn't live in ancient Greece, right? We're going to stop here. Hopefully this video uploads and records with no problems. Otherwise, I'm going to pull my hair out because I'm getting frustrated with this. Peace out.